disclaimer. I would like to compliment the International Diplomatic Academy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for organizing this important seminar on women in diplomacy on the International Day of Women in Diplomacy. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. As you have rightly said, across civilizations, not just in the eastern part of the world, but also in the western part of the world, the conduct of foreign policy, like warfare, was assumed to be a masculine domain. Governance was the privilege of men, while women were relegated to supporting roles behind the scene. India's journey in this regard has been instructive and inspiring. The Indian Foreign Service was open to men and women on equal terms at its very inception in 1949. This was not incidental. It was rooted in the values of our independence movement and the constitutional promise of equality laid out in 1950. Our early pioneers in the independence movement were not just participants in diplomacy, they were architects of it. Consider Vijayalakshmi Pandit, India's ambassador to the Soviet Union, the United States and the United Kingdom, and the first woman to serve as the president of the UN General Assembly in 1953. When told that an ambassador's role was not meant for a woman, she answered with action, not rhetoric. Or take Hansa Mehta, a member of India's Constituent Assembly and a key contributor to the framing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was at her insistence, and she argued with Eleanor Roosevelt, and changed the language from all men are born equal and free to all human beings are born free and equal. Yet, even with such groundbreaking leadership, institutional hurdles and patriarchal mindsets persisted and crept into the formation of the Indian Foreign Service. Women in the Indian Foreign Service for decades were required to resign upon marriage or seek permission to continue. C.B. Muttamma, India's first female ambassador, not only broke barriers by her appointment, but also took the government of India to court in 1979 to challenge these discriminatory regulations. Her battle paved the way for more equitable service conditions. Since you asked me what inspired me, these are the women of India that inspired me to join the Foreign Service. Since then, progress has been both visible and measurable. In the 1980s, women comprised only 10% of Indian diplomats. Today, women represent 34% of the Indian Foreign Service. India has already appointed 3 women as foreign secretaries, our first women permanent representative to the United Nations, 2 women as foreign ministers, including the late Ms. Sushma Swaraj, who brought a deeply humane ethos to diplomacy. India has not only recognized the importance of gender equity in diplomacy, it has acted on it. In 2007, India made history by sending the first all-female formed police unit to the United Nations mission in Liberia. This success became a global model for gender-responsive peacekeeping. At the United Nations, India has consistently supported the Women, Peace and Security agenda, advocating for women's participation in peace-building and conflict resolution processes. Under India's G20 presidency, women-led development was not a peripheral topic, but a core theme, affirming our belief that economic and global governance must reflect gender equity. These are not isolated initiatives. They reflect an evolving gender-sensitive policy, approach and policy in the foreign policy ecosystem. But while representation has improved, parity has not been achieved. So what must be done? Across the diplomatic world, women face slower career advancements, limited access to top-tier assignments, more pronounced challenges in balancing personal and professional responsibilities. Female diplomats are significantly less likely to be accompanied by families on their postings. Those with spouses and children face practical and emotional burdens not typically shared by male colleagues. If we are to move from inclusion to influence, from representation to leadership, we must recognize that this is not just a question of fairness. It is a matter of policy effectiveness also. And we must act on multiple fronts. Institutional reforms, such as introduction and enforcement of affirmative action measures where needed. India has announced reservation of 30% of parliamentary seats for women, creating support system for diplomats with caregiving responsibilities. It's mandated by law in India for every ministry to have caregiving creches and facilities for men and women. Equal access to career building assignments regardless of gender or family status. We also need normative and cultural shifts beyond tokenism. Representation must be meaningful, redefining leadership qualities in foreign policy to include empathy, collaboration, and inclusivity, not just force and assertiveness. Challenging the outdated belief that diplomacy must always be muscular to be effective. Women in diplomacy need more than just entry points. They need voice. And voice is strengthened by presence in numbers, by access to decision making, and by amplification across levels of leadership. Excellencies, colleagues and friends, let us be clear. Gender parity in diplomacy is not just a moral imperative, it is a strategic necessity, especially in today's world. A more diverse diplomatic corps leads to richer dialogue, broader perspectives, and better outcomes. So let us ask, can diplomacy be more inclusive? Can foreign policy reflect the lived realities of men and women equally? Can we move beyond cracking the glass ceiling and finally shattering it? I believe we can. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.